Hi everyone, this is Rob Lashley with MMORPG.com, and tonight I have with me Chris Wilson from Grinding Gear Games. Chris, you want to say hi to everybody?
Hey, how are things going?
Pretty good. How are you doing?
I'm doing really well, actually. It's the end of the week.
I still got one more day. Well, I want to thank you for taking the time out of your evening, because I know that you guys are pretty busy down there on a Friday night, and spending some time with us. First off, for those people that might not know who it is you are, what do you do with Grinding Gears?
So I'm one of the founders. Four of us created the company back in 2006, and my main role at the moment is production and management, so I'm in charge of deciding what goes in the patches and overseeing that, and it's been a lot of fun.
Alright. So, okay, I guess grinding Path of Exile, which is why we're all here today to talk about this. This is your debut game from Grinding Gears?
Yeah, that's right. It's our first game.
And how long have you guys had this in the works?
6 years and 2 months was what it took before we got to open beta. That was a month ago, so yeah, 6 years and 3 months in total.
Okay, and for those that are watching the stream, that's what I've got in loop right now. It's the open beta trailer. They just went into open beta on January 23rd. Thank you for the birthday present. I appreciate it.
Not a problem. We planned it all around you, my friend.
Yeah. So, first question. Why is it still an open beta? I mean, the game, it's at this point, it's very polished. You added in that third, I shouldn't say final act, but you added in the third act when you went into the open beta. Why is this game still in beta and not yet at a 1.0 or a release state?
So, I completely agree with the sentiment, and I get frustrated at games that sit in beta forever as well. You know, there comes a point when the developer needs to say this is a finished product and we should treat it as such. And our intention is to only really change two more broad things while we're in open beta. The first one is we want to finish Act 3, and it's not quite finished yet. There are still some areas we have to add. There's a huge boss fight coming right at the end, and this is something that we're hoping to have ready by around August or September of this year. And secondly, there's a big laundry list of stability, game performance issues, and basically all the things people expect before the game can really, be treated as a finished product. And the users know what I'm talking about. There's a lot of small things that we need to fix up before we're really proud to say that the game is released. And we hope to have that stuff sorted out in the same time frame.
Okay, so in addition to stability things and, you get the big boss fight with Act 3, what are some of the things that users can see being added, like contest-wise, in 2013?
So we have a couple of big things there. The first is that we're entering a patch schedule where we're aiming for a patch a week that introduces at least one new skill, some new microtransactions, some new unique items, and that type of thing. We basically want to make a pledge that we're going to be adding new content on a specific schedule, and this is in addition to all of the normal features we're adding. So, for example, if we introduce new race modes for our ladder event system, then we'll be adding those in addition to this. And mentioning that, the ladder event system, which actually starts tomorrow morning, is a schedule of 109 events that we're going to be running over the next 6 weeks. And that's some content that people can play in addition to actually playing the regular game by itself.
Okay, can we talk a little bit more in detail about the race schedule? I know that you guys kind of did some of this in the closed beta, but for those that didn't participate in the closed beta and they're here now for the open beta, what can they expect in this race season that you guys have coming up? I guess it's starting next week, the 25th?
Yeah, I think it starts in 25 hours from now, according to my clock.
Oh, it's February 23rd, I'm sorry.
Yeah, basically a race event is an event that lasts for between a few hours and a week, and we have 2 one-week events coming up in the season, but the other ones are generally between 1 and 4 hours long. And they often have interesting rules, like, there are events where you're allowed to play in a party, there are events where you can only play by yourself and you can't trade with other players, which of course is very different than being in a party, and there are events where the monsters move super fast, for example, making it really difficult. Those are the turbo events. And we've got a whole pile of other interesting ones coming. I mean, there's events that we call blood magic ones that we're going to be testing where the players will know what I mean by that. But basically, when they're playing in a race like this, they have, say, a few hours to get to as high level as they can in the game, and we award prizes based on how well they do at various objectives. For example, if they're the first character to full clear a certain area, or the first person to kill a specific boss, then they get some points, and if they are, the highest level marauder, then they get more points, and these accumulate towards getting some special prizes that can only be obtained from these races.
Now, are these something that people are going to have to pay an additional fee to enter into, or is this just part of the league play that's going to be part of the game?
So these ones here are completely free to play. Now there may be races in the future that cost money. I mean, that's something that would definitely be interesting to look into, but at the moment this is all free. So this first season, and as far as I'm concerned, subsequent seasons for some time will definitely be free to enter, and players need not pay anything for that.
Okay, so a little bit less about gameplay and a little bit more holistically about the game. How does it feel to be compared to, you know, the real, like people refer to it as the real Diablo 3, as opposed to necessarily standing on its own as Path of Exile? Do you guys take that as a compliment to be put in line with a game like that, or do you guys want to do something to where, I mean, you've already done it with your skill tree, but you know, stand on your own and not be compared to other games that are out there in the action RPG genre?
Well, we're only here because we love action RPGs. I mean, before we started the project, we've been playing a ton of Diablo and Titan Quest and Dungeon Siege, so the reason we're making this type of game is it's the type of game that we love. And the fact that people can mention us alongside the giants of this genre together, I just can't get over how cool it is to be compared in that way.
Okay. So, what's actually going on in Path of Exile? What's the story behind here? Why do we care about our characters? We washed up on a beach. What are we doing?
Okay, so the player's been exiled from a small island off the coast called Oriath. And it's not immediately clear to the player why they've been exiled, but they wake up on the beach of Ryclas and they have to fend for themselves. And the place is really dark and gritty. You know, it's them against the environment, them against other players. They have to work very hard to actually make any headway in getting any kind of power themselves. And they soon discover there are magic items and skill gems and other weird things that they're not used to existing on Oriath. So perhaps something's going on in Ryclas in terms of, you know, a background kind of dark magic that they have to look into. And that's the arc that Act 1 and 3, Act 1, 2, and 3 cover so far in the game. There's a lot of trying to find out why they're there, you know, finding clues of Oriathan expeditions into Ryclas. One of the main antagonists of the game you meet quite often, and she's there to see some form of power for herself. And so throughout the existing 3-act arc we have at the moment, you get to see quite a lot about why Oriath is both exiling people here and why they're interested in exploring this continent for themselves. And we have lots more acts planned in the future that go into more detail.
Well, you just answered my next question that I had lined up. You said the 3-act current story arc. When can we see possibility Act 4? Is that something in 2014? Further on down the line than that?
I'd like to think that we can do an act a year, but that depends on us getting, you know, the necessary support from the users to be able to scale up the team. I think Act 3, which isn't even finished yet, has taken 18 months so far, and we're very proud of it, though there are some more things we're working on this year to finish it. And I do think that with decent support from the community, we'll be able to get the subsequent acts finished in close to a year each.
Okay, and you talk about support for the community. I think it's important to point out at this time, if people don't know already, that the client's a free download. It's free to play. There's microtransactions. And going through your store, there's absolutely nothing that anybody could even start to consider as a pay-to-win item. Everything's either a pet or a cosmetic, or is that your whole philosophy there, is to not add convenience because you don't want to be considered pay-to-win?
That's right. Well, it's partly because we're gamers, and we made the game that we want to play, and we don't want to be playing a game where the players can just, you know, buy their way into power. Now, the closest thing that we would sell to any kind of functionality is additional stash storage space, but because of the fact that players get 4 free stash tabs with each account, and many players like to make 10 accounts to store all their items on, this is barely a convenience to have them all in one place, and doesn't offer any immediate gameplay advantage when you're actually playing. And it's really important to us that all the players are on a fair playing field, especially considering the game has PvP content.
Okay. Now, all we've talked about so far has been PvE. What really do we have as far as PvP in Path of Exile?
So there are a couple of different PvP modes that we've implemented. The first one is the set of PvP options that you can find in the game by talking to the NPC called Grust in Act 2, and he supports 1v1, 3v3, in various different level brackets. And this is something that we introduced during the closed beta that people have a lot of fun with, but we haven't really reinvigorated and supported fully yet in open beta. We intend to sit there and say, okay, how can we make PvP more interesting? How can we add modes that add depth to it? And what can we do in terms of tournament support and prizes for PvP? And that's something we're certainly going to be looking into this year, probably in the near future, to make PvP have more active support. And the other mode that we have is what's called cutthroat mode, which is a league type. And we run these relatively rarely at the moment until we get the balance sorted out. But in that mode, it's basically full PvP. You can kill people and take all their items. And it's an optional opt-in thing that you have to make new characters to play in. So players who don't want that to happen don't have to play in it.
Okay, so it's essentially the PvE campaign, but it's cutthroat mode, and if you ran upon people, you can kill them and take their items.
Yeah, you can invade people's instances, and if you can chase them down and kill them, you get their stuff. And it's a lot of fun to play, because you get dilemmas of, if you find an amazing sword, for example, you have the choice of whether you want to use the sword to protect yourself, or put it in the stash where it's safe, thinking that way you're not risking it if you do get killed by someone accidentally.
Okay, so you can keep things in your stash, and that way you cannot get them looted from you, but there's no way other than that to bind items to you.
Yeah.
And it's full loot, so anything they have, you can take?
Yeah, apart from the skill gems and flasks, and we'd love for those to drop, but it's actually really hard for the players to get skill gems and flasks again if they've just been killed. So we let them keep those particular things so they can get right back into it with some more items they find on the ground.
That's awesome. I didn't actually know that you had that cutthroat mode in the game yet, so that's one of the... I got quite a few people that would be very interested to find out about that.
It's not turned on as a thing that you can play at will any time, but it is something that we run tests for occasionally, and I think we've run... I mean, the community will correct me here, but I think we've run somewhere in the region of 8 to 10 cutthroat events in the past. But we'd love to have it be a full-time thing once we've solved the obvious issues of player griefing.
I think, yeah, that's a pretty tough one as far as how do you stop somebody from griefing in full load PvP like that.
It's 150 then, you know.
Yeah. So we talk again, kind of back to the player support. We've looked at the items; they're cosmetic. And there's actually one option where people can spend $1,000 and get a special item made in tandem with you guys. How many of those have you actually sold?
So we've only sold a few of the $1,000 packages in open beta, and that's about the rate that we want to be selling those at, because they require quite a lot of commitment from the developers to make them. And they have custom art, they have custom design, and we try to implement new gameplay features with them. You know, if you want a sword that turns enemies to stone when it hits them, and that's something we can certainly discuss doing. But during the closed beta, we actually included this reward with anyone who pledged $1,000 of support for us. And this worked really well at selling those $1,000 packs, and we sold a total of 250 of them at that level. So we're still working through the backlog of these 250 unique items that we have to make for our players. And at this stage, we're expecting to get about 3 of them done per week for the rest of the year. And this is at roughly the rate that the players finish communicating their designs of them to us. So we've got a bit of a backlog, but we'll get through it.
Well, I know at that many, it obviously wasn't your parents that bought them, so that's quite a substantial number to support from the community, so that's great to see that you guys have that. Speaking of community, I want to talk about the economy of the game. You know, there's no auction house, there's no gold or money per se dropping off of mobs. It's just a lot of loot, and you can go back to your townfolk and trade them for items, but you can't sell them. So what was the design philosophy behind that?
So this comes from a background of playing a lot of Diablo 2 online, and also seeing that similar things happen in Guild Wars when we tried that out. In both games, the trade economies didn't actually use the gold that was present in the game. In Diablo 2, you'd see people trading high runes or Stone of Jordans, or in some cases some duplicated boots. And in Guild Wars, we'd see people unable to put enough gold in the trade window because there was a 100,000 cap. So they'd trade globs of ectoplasm and various other non-gold butter items. We soon realized that once we'd stripped out all the annoying things that people don't like spending gold on, like repair costs and buying potions and stuff, there wasn't actually any reason to have gold in the game at all. And that's why it came down to basically having items that barter. And once we realized that we needed to provide items that would be fun to barter with, we decided that it would be a good idea for them to be inherently useful in themselves and modifying your other gear, so that they were basically an economic sink, and that way we don't accumulate piles of items that aren't useful. And this worked really well. We see about 50% of those items getting used as soon as they drop, which is really good for keeping the economy in bay.
Okay. So some non-game aspects, let's talk about. Recently, it's been kind of going across the media that you guys had some security issues. Would you like to talk about those?
So, with any online game, as soon as you launch, players try to compromise each other's accounts, and there's a lot of ways that they can do this. Five or six distinct ways that we're seeing. And when we launched Open Beta, we didn't have any mechanism where if your password was known to another player, to prevent that guy logging into your account, because we assumed players will take care of their passwords. And this was a very naive assumption to make. So although the attackers aren't getting the passwords from us, there are lots of relatively easy ways that players can lose their passwords to each other. So we have a patch which we're going to deploy literally after this interview. Like, the first thing we do when we're finished talking about the game is to deploy that patch. So that's within an hour or so. And that patch will make it so that you can't log into people's accounts from different locations. And we've tried to communicate to the players clearly things they can do to keep their passwords safe, but it's clear that there are a lot of things that are very difficult to actually get people to follow. For example, they can have a computer that's completely secure, there's no malware on it, they don't click phishing links, they do everything they can to keep it safe, but the fact that they used their password on some other game 3 years ago that's since been compromised will mean that it's on a list of 4 million email addresses that's gradually getting checked by people with a lot of IPs.
So in other words, if you use the same password for different games over the last 5 years, and that game no longer exists, or its database has been compromised, you've got legions of computers that are running these accounts with these passwords that are going to crack it, and it's not necessarily anything that was on your back end.
That's right. I mean, we can see a lot of different ways that users are doing this. For a start, there's lots of hack software that's being distributed that clearly has keyloggers in it. Like, we can see, a guy will write into customer support and say, my map hack isn't working properly, it only works in these areas, can you help? And we write back saying, you need to get rid of this now and change your password. 4 hours later, they complain that all their items are gone. You know, I mean, we see this clear case that almost everyone who's mentioned to us they're running hack software has lost their items within a day. And then we get people where, upon investigating with them really closely, okay, tell me about this password. Where did it come from? Have you clicked any links? We find out that they've used it on, say, LinkedIn, for example, which had a password compromise a while ago.
So, change your passwords frequently, change them often, make them something difficult, and don't share them or use them across accounts. That being said, what are you guys... So, this isn't necessarily your problem, as far as it's not something you created, but it definitely is a problem for your community. So
it is our problem if it's causing users to lose their items and not enjoy playing the game. So
what steps have you taken or are going to take with this patch to help combat that?
So there are two specific things that the patch changes. The first one is that if you've saved your login details on your machine by ticking the Save Password box, that information is only now available to work from the IP address that you saved it on. Previously, we did save it on the machine, as it describes. People with enough access to your machine, for example, if you've got a backdoor or a Trojan installed on it, they were able to go and fish out that file and take it, getting access to your account. Now that won't work. But the much bigger change is that even if someone has your proper password, there's literally nothing they can do to access your machine from a remote location, because when they log in with your password, it will lock the account. We detect that they're connecting from another location and send an unlock code to the registered email address. Now, this does require that you actually have an email address set up, and we let people play without verifying the address, but if they want to use these security features, it's really important that they verify the email address by clicking on the link they were sent.
So in other words, if you run map hacks, make sure that you verify your email account so you can get your password protected.
Well, we're anticipating banning all the people that run map hacks as soon as we get the ability to completely say for sure that we know they're running it. I mean, at the moment we're pretty sure which users are, but they've got a bit of a grace period to get rid of that software. So this is one of the warnings they're getting. But we can't tolerate any kind of external hack programs like that.
Okay. So don't try and cheat the system. You're going to get caught. Yes. And unfortunately, some people are paying the penalty now as it is. So is there anything that we really haven't talked about that you have coming up in 2013 that you really want to make sure the community knows about?
Well, we've discussed that late in the year we'll be transitioning to the full release, which involves a lot of new content, and between now and then we'll be releasing patches that add new skills and other features, new unique items, new microtransactions. We've got the big security patch coming today, and I'm pretty sure that covers the schedule for this year. I mean, obviously there's a ton of stuff being added in those patches. You know, we're hoping to improve the trade system dramatically and add new game modes, improve PvP a lot.
Okay. I just cut away from the looping video, and I just wanted to show people, which, in my opinion, which, for what it's worth, is the most unique feature to this game, and what really drew it to me when I first saw it, was people were like, you got to check out the skill tree. And we haven't talked about it yet, but let's kind of talk about the skill tree. I've got it opened up. I'm actually a marauder. I just started a new guy. He's not very into it. He's got a few points. Going mostly melee, and I'm two-handed, and I can curl back around here and start to pick up strength, damage, and then actually get to speed, which would be really out of somebody else's tree. So what made you guys come up with this and say, hey, let's make a big circle and with a lot of skills and let people, if they put enough time into it, be able to pretty much learn whatever they want to?
So it didn't originally start as a circle. It actually started with all the classes at the center branching out in different directions. So you'd have your strength, I guess, segment of the pie, and you'd have your intelligence one. And the idea was that you could splash into other classes. And I'm using the term splash from Magic the Gathering, meaning to take something that's off class. And the intention was that, although there'd be a clear focus on what was best for your character, you could be versatile and go and get something obscure if you wanted to. And this stems from our desire to have a lot of character customization. We do expect that most players will choose to do a relatively simple, obvious build with, the nice, powerful things near the start location, but more and more people are finding weird, complex combinations from across the tree. And eventually we branched it out, so as you can see, everyone has their own start location, and this really helps a lot with class identity.
All right, and then the next big thing that I guess separates this game from any of the rest out there are the way that the skills work with your gems. Where did that come from, and how robust of a system is that? Because you can very differentiate your character based on that skill tree, but now you can even more so make your character different from every other character out there based on your gem combination.
So the first thing we knew about the design of the skills in the game is we wanted them to be itemized, because we believe that in action RPGs like this, it's all about items. If the thing that you're finding can't be gotten on items, then it can't be traded and have interesting, re-rolling performed on it and upgrades. So we knew that it was important that we had skills on items. And right back at the beginning, they were actually baked into the items. So you'd find a sword that had the cleave skill built into it. This ran into a lot of problems, so we eventually came up with the idea of augmenting the skills onto the items using gems and sockets. And that was really cool, because you can upgrade them and you can trade them, and there are different recipes you can do to change them. And this, of course, led to the support gem system. And at that point we realized that the game Final Fantasy VII had a very similar system where you can socket materia next to each other and modify their properties. And that led to us thinking of a lot of interesting ideas for support gems, inspired by the type of thing that they used in their system. And now we have situations where people are changing the skills so much that we don't even recognize them anymore based on weird support gem combinations.
So, okay. At this point, starting to get a lot of questions coming in through the chat. Do you have any problems answering some of the chat room's questions?
I'm happy to answer the questions.
All right. So if anybody's out there got any questions for Chris, put them in there and we'll see what we get.
Okay, we'll just read out the ones that you'd like.
Okay, so as you add more content with higher level zones, will low level maps be removed and replaced with higher level maps, or will level 66 maps still exist in the game a year from now when Act 4 is out?
The short answer here is that we don't know for sure yet, so I can't give you a definitive answer, but one thing I know is that I don't want to outdate everyone's work by just slapping Act 4 at the end of the game as a higher level area. I mean, consider, people right now are grinding really hard to gain levels that are starting to take them weeks per level to get, and they're re-rolling items and working very hard to upgrade a few % worth of damage out of an item. And if we come along and say, okay guys, level cap's 10 levels higher and the items are all better now, your old ones are worthless, that's just undoing months and months and months of work. So it's important that all the future content slots in so that the stuff that people are doing now isn't worthless. Maybe there will be a few areas that are slightly higher, but it doesn't mean that all of the current places they're playing are just going to be trivial low-level content.
We're seeing requests. Granted, the game isn't actually released yet. Do you have intent to make a Mac client?
We're discussing the production of a Mac client with an external company that specializes in ports like that. And there are some interesting advantages here, because if they port the engine to OpenGL, it'll mean that we also have the ability to support Linux clients and potentially new platforms like the PlayStation 4, which is an x86-based architecture like the PC.
So you're hinting that you guys might actually end up on the PlayStation 4?
Well, that's one of those things that is possible, but we have no firm plans. I mean, we only heard about the console yesterday,
And you still haven't seen it yet.
That's right, there aren't any pictures. It must be awesome. So we are planning to do a Mac client eventually, and it does run on the Mac using various emulation software, It's just that we'd like to support it natively.
Okay, let's see. Oh, combat text. Do you guys have any plans to address combat text in the coming future?
Combat text is a frequently requested feature, and it's very interesting because a lot of users expect it because they've played games like World of Warcraft and Diablo 3, where there's combat text. And when we designed our game, we'd seen that combat text was used in other online RPGs, and we kind of didn't like it. We felt it cluttered the screen and was somewhat unnecessary. I mean, we have our system, so when you do damage to a monster, the size of the impact in terms of the blood or the fire dictates how much damage you did. And when you get a crit, it doesn't say crit, it's just that the screen shakes and you get larger effects. And this was done on purpose so that it's representing what's happening in the screen without us having to spam it with words. And we thought this would be good enough, and we like it. I mean, I've played with combat text on in Path of Exile, and it's not... I don't like it personally, and the other developers agree. The problem is the players really want it, and we don't want to disappoint our players, especially if they're paying customers. So we have to take the feedback on board, and we're definitely experimenting with a variety of options, but I can't make any promises about it being added soon. I would rather keep true to the way we've designed the game than to implement something really spammy that actually is worse for the game.
Okay. You've talked about adding new skills to the game. Do you have any intentions of adding new classes?
There is the ability to add new classes to the game in the future because we could easily come up with other ratios between strength, dex, and intelligence, come up with a backstory, a whole bunch of new animations in a model, and slap them in. But at this stage we have no firm plans of any specific class that we're working on there. And this is partly because adding things like new skills adds a whole bunch more to the gameplay than just another class at this point. We'd rather do the low-hanging fruit that adds a ton to the game at this stage.
Okay. We did talk about third-party software, hacks, and stuff like that. Do you guys have any intention of ever supporting third-party software that may not be malicious? You know, just possible UI modifications, anything of that nature?
The short answer is no, and the more complex answer is that even unmalicious third-party software would need to be checked to make sure that A, it doesn't compromise the person's machine, and B, that it doesn't have any hidden functionality which actually can be used for gameplay advantage. And while the scope of gameplay advantage is very low in a game like this that has a robust client-server model, there's the ability to do things like display stuff on the map before you get to it, and various other things that the client needs to know for production reasons. With regard to UI mods, we greatly prefer maintaining a game where the UI is consistent. Now, I understand that players would love to move everything around, but there is an advantage in having it in a consistent way between players. It's partly that it means that players can't spam their UI to get an advantage of all these countdowns and stuff that other players can't see. And also, that like action RPGs historically don't have dynamic UIs. I mean, Diablo 1, Diablo 2, Diablo 3, they don't have UI add-ons. Titan Quest didn't, none of the Dungeon series did. None of the Dungeon Siege series did. It's mostly online MMORPGs like World of Warcraft that do, and we're not that type of game.
Okay, we just talked about the Diablo series. And in the latest incarnation, we saw that there was a problem with people hitting level cap pretty soon at 60, and then, bam, they were there, and there wasn't a whole lot to do. And then they introduced the Paragon system and made additional leveling on top of that. I've seen people talking about they've already come close to getting to the level cap in the game now. Do you have anything in mind to address that, or do you have, you know, additional layer that you might put on top of that later on?
So you're very right that in Diablo 3 people hit the level cap and then needed more content. However, people aren't actually close to our level cap. They are at level 91, but that's very, very far away. The reason why we went with diminishing returns on the levels is so that we get the system where you can impactfully build a good character in a couple of days if you know what you're doing. I mean, I see people get to level 60 in a day because they're really pro at playing the game, and that's cool. It lets you get to the end-game content quickly if you'd like to, but it takes longer and longer to level up. And while people are at 91 after a month, our schedule definitely doesn't have people hitting level 100 particularly fast at all. I mean, it's going to be quite a while before anyone hits 92, and then even longer to 93, and even longer again to 94. And while people will hit 100 eventually, we did want it to be an achievable goal. That's certainly a very long commitment for an individual player. And the marginal gain you get from hitting each additional level is actually very small. I mean, it's just one passive skill point. You're not able to equip any higher items because there aren't level 95 items. It's just the additional passive skill point that they get in a couple of points of life.
Okay. I don't know if we're getting trolled on this one or not, but people are talking about buying pants as a cosmetic item. Is that something that's not in the store yet?
It's mostly trolling. See,
Okay.
one of the things that recent action RPGs did is they added a slot called pants, and this is present in both Torchlight and Diablo 3. And it's because if you're wanting to add item slots to your action RPG, having trousers is one of the ways to do it. Whereas we looked at our items and said, you know, if we added more slots, we're going to get dilution of the item mods, where they're not going to be individually as impactful, because instead of having, say, 60 or 70 mods affecting you, you might have 100, and that means they all have to be slightly smaller so that you don't get power creep. And so we made the conscious decision to not try spamming additional item slots on the characters yet. I mean, it's something we can explore in the future. There's 10 years of lifetime in the game that we can add to these, so we haven't added a pants slot. In addition, there are no pants on some of the armors of the characters, and this is because when we made different versions of the characters in terms of their art, the lower armors are missing the pants. And this is something we do plan to fix visually. I mean, it would be nice if there were pants on those items. So the players like to ask when there are going to be pants, partly as a troll thing and partly because they don't like bare legs.
That's pretty funny. Score one for them. Is there a row level hidden out there somewhere? Will we see it?
I cannot comment on the existence of that level or any secret items that might lead to it that are already in the game, perhaps. Or that could just be a troll answer.
Let's see. Skill animation microtransactions other than like casters. Any plans to enhance those?
The next one is a caster one as well. Part of this is because it's actually a lot easier to produce the caster ones quickly. So we've got quite a lot of those planned, and now they're getting finished first. We do have skill microtransactions for other types of attacks coming. I mean, there's an awesome-looking Rain of Arrows one that I like, and a certain unannounced combat skill has an alternate look, which is very, very cool. It's just that the caster ones got finished first. This is partly because, in their case, they're just a thing flying through the air that you can change how it looks, rather than something that actually has custom animation that goes with it.
Do you want to talk about the crafting that's in the game right now, and the recipes?
Sure. So there's a lot of different levels here. I mean, for starters, there's the currency items that are individually useful to re-roll stuff or improve your gear. Then there are the complex vendor recipes, where you can put weird sets of items into the vendor and get interesting things out. And we're actually reviewing those a bit at the moment, because in light of good leveling and item collection strategies, some of them are much better than others. And it's causing players who understand what good recipes to use to get a bit of an economic advantage over those that haven't worked it out yet.
Okay. Is there any... Are you guys looking to add, like, maybe player names visible in parties so people can help identify, friend from foe?
The short answer is yes. Generally, that type of thing is going to occur. We don't have anything ready to deploy there. We can get player names onto the map easier than we can get nameplates onto the actual game field, because those feel quite cluttery, especially if you want to start applying them to minions and various other things where you have quite a lot of entities. But yes, that is the type of thing that we're looking at improving.
The extra gore microtransaction, is that in the works, and will it be done?
It's almost ready. We just have a few technical things to sort out. And with microtransactions, because people are paying money for them, we really don't want to release them in a half-finished state. So when it's ready, it will be awesome.
Okay. They want to let you know that they want a new ground slam animation.
Yeah, the blood slam is, again, basically ready as well.
Since you guys aren't, well, I don't want to phrase it like that, but since your primary focus right now is PvE, are you guys, how concerned are you about the PvP parity at the moment? And that's, like, kind of, where is that on the design docket? I mean, you're concerned right now about getting Act 3 finished into, like, a release state, correct, and PvP is important as well, but, I mean, are you really, how deep are you working on PvP balance at the moment?
We're not actively working on PvP balance this particular week, but I would expect that in a time frame of 3 to 6 weeks, we make changes regarding that. But the key thing to consider, though, is that we don't actually expect PvP to be balanced in the sense that every single build has an equal chance of winning a match. Instead, it's very much a I guess it's a bit like Magic the Gathering, where there are silver bullets that are really good against effective builds. Like, for example, if you do pure fire damage and lots of it, then the guy who's over-spec'd into fire resist to the point where he's got his cap up to almost 99%, he's probably going to beat you. And likewise, if you have an attack that really, really concentrates on chaos damage, and then someone is immune to chaos damage because of a keystone they picked, they're probably going to beat you as well. This is good, though, because it means that you want to build a variety of key PvP characters and pick ones that are appropriate for the metagame, rather than all the fights being balanced away to the point where it's an equal chance of them winning.
Charms. Are there any plans for charms in the future? Kind of like the Hex Small charm?
We tried... Nice reference, by the way, with the hexing charm. We tried to investigate charms in the past, but we found that a constrained inventory was not actually fun. We wanted it so players had room to pick up items, and so having it so that those items go in the inventory really reduced the fun of actually being able to play properly. So we investigated other options of places people can put them, and we also discovered that if you're dealing with a system where you're going to get 20 or 30 of one particular small item, that they become individually unimpactful. The gain from adding an extra charm is not a very large gain. So we're revisiting that design, taking it back to the drawing board, trying to find ways that we can make it more impactful and fun for players. Okay.
Another question that's come across quite a few times is support for guilds. You know, we got the friends list, but is there going to be like a guild/clan support in the future?
Yes, and that's exactly one of the things that we could have in by the end of the year, maybe a lot sooner, and it really depends whether we want to batch it up to make a really impactful... I know I'm repeating impactful too much, but if we want to make a large patch that has a lot of guild stuff at once, then we could do that, though I'd prefer to get the features in as they're ready. And we can... One of the short-term things we want to solve there is the ability to have guild chat, basically, which I guess is a clan. I mean, some users really hate us using the word guild because it brings up connotations of World of Warcraft, so I'm going to call it a clan just to differentiate it.
Okay.
But the ability to chat with your friends in a private channel, and then eventually have storage that's shared with those friends, will of course be very important.
Okay. There are people that... CTOP, I'm retaining quite a bit of it, actually, so sorry about that. People are asking about Melee. I guess they're feeling that it's underpowered. Do you agree with that? Is it something that you're addressing, or is this more like L2P noob crying about the Melee?
It's a bit of both. It's always good for players to learn to play that. I'm just kidding. No, but with Melee, there are problems, and it's a variety of things. So initially, the first problem is there isn't a great diversity of Melee skills that work with a lot of different weapon types. You know, the claw users have no area of effect skill that's particularly good. So we have skills coming that will help address that. In addition, one of the Melee classes, the Duelist, is just weaker than the other classes at the moment, and we have changes coming to its passive skill tree area so that it's stronger. And there are quite a lot of different facets to that, so it's not an immediate change, but it is coming in the near future. The next issue is that sometimes melee combat feels bad because of various sync issues, and we're working very hard to resolve that. It hopefully won't be long before we can make some really big changes there, and that will mean that you feel much more connected with combat when you're playing with a melee character.
Okay, this one's more of a technical question. I've seen people kind of talking about this in chat today as I've been playing as well. Certain people are having desync issues. Is that something that you guys are really looking at? Obviously, be cause for concern, but is that more like a vocal minority as opposed to it being a huge problem? It
is a larger problem than a vocal minority, and we've put a lot of work in the past into good resyncing code, and it is helping, but it isn't as good as it can be. And this is partly a matter of we have some good ideas for ways that we can improve the situation. We just have to find time among the stability and security stuff to deal with that. And it's definitely on the short-term agenda.
Okay, and then let's see, I got one more for you, because then I know that you guys are in a rush to put out that security patch, so let's see if we can get a good one from the chat room. Okay, I like this one, so I'm going to ask it for you. Is there going to be more spreadsheet-like features that make it easier for people to theorycraft builds, or no?
So one of the things that can really help with build theory crafting is exposing a lot more of the data that goes on behind the scenes. And an example is, we currently have a table on the site of what the item mods are and how large they are and what values they affect. And that's really useful. People love getting that data, plugging it into spreadsheets and Theorycrafting. But one thing we don't show is, for example, what item types those mods spawn on. For example, life only goes up to 79 on rings, and this isn't described anywhere on the site. The players have to work it out. And once we clarify that kind of detail, it will really help the players being able to plan without having to learn specific bits of arcane knowledge that change from patch to patch invisibly.
Okay, I lied. I have one more question. That's because this person keeps asking, how does it feel to out-Diablo Blizzard?
I don't think we've actually necessarily achieved that. We're very different, though. I mean, we're appealing to a different target audience. And
I was
my
just trying to give you a compliment.
I appreciate that. But our goal here is to service our fans as best we can and provide something different from other companies.
But anyways, you guys have done an outstanding job. I really enjoyed it. I am a fan of the game. Unfortunately, I don't get enough time to play games anymore because I have to cover so many. But I've definitely spent quite a few hours playing with this. Thanks for your time. I know that you're very hard at work and getting ready to put that new patch in so these people can stop getting their accounts hacked. I appreciate your time. Chat room, thanks for coming out. I hope you learned a few things and enjoyed the conversation. If you do, make sure you follow the channel because we do interviews like this every Thursday. They're not always at this late at night. But everybody have a great evening.
Thank you very much for having me.